In early spring 2020, while the world was getting used to being stuck indoors due to COVID-19 knockdowns, birds began to find their own homes to settle in. My son had helped me put up 3 birdhouses the previous autumn, and as spring took a firm hold, a pair of blue tits began to take an interest in this particular birdhouse. Unfortunately, he couldn't visit to see, but we kept him up to date with the pair's constant visits to the new home. Growing up in an estate in South London, we never used to have a garden. So when we moved, when I was 10, Mum took the bull by the horns and started growing everything possible. From flowers, to fruits, to vegetables, everything has been grown in this garden at one point in time. Since moving back, I've made my own addition to the garden. I think it fits in quite well. It didn't take long for us to realise the birds had actually nested in there, and there must be some kind of chicks inside. The quivering of the wings apparently is a female signifying to the male to feed the birds. Kept doing it an awful lot, and even when the male had got inside, just carried on. Not entirely sure, maybe it just likes a little dance. Over the next week or so, they settled into a rhythm. They would come back one at a time, food in mouth, disappear into the bird box to feed the little chicks. They always hop between the top of the fence, down into the bush, and then onto the trellis. This would carry on for hours upon hours upon hours. Not entirely sure how such little creatures get so much energy, but they carried on doing it. Going in, coming out. Going in, coming out. Time in the garden is always precious, but having a chance to watch these birds do their thing with this little nest was amazing. We'd sit out there really quietly, trying not to make any kind of noise or sudden movements, just to make sure we didn't scare them off. The payback would be just sitting there with a cup of tea, listening to the little tweets. It's not exactly a massive V to an engine, but I still quite liked it. My brother Mike has always liked birds. Bit of a twitcher and a bird nerd. He told us there could be like 7 chicks inside there. Whenever they would begin to get a bit bigger, and you obviously in a bit of a fight, because occasionally you'd see the actual box itself shimmy from side to side as they're trying to get to the food. A couple of times I had to go and actually straighten it up because it got pretty cockeyed on the fence post. But being Britain, the weather doesn't always stay that great. Even through the rain and the winds, the birds still kept coming back and forwards. Though we didn't have breakfast outside anymore, we could watch from the window. The breeze was really strong, you could see them fighting against it. But those little wings really went for it, and they could always get it back into the nest. But as quick as the rain comes, it goes. And they're backwards and forwards again, it to and from the nest, feeding those little hungry mouths inside. We weren't entirely sure how long it had been since they'd actually hatched, so we watched every day to see if we could catch them beginning to fledge. In the meantime, we'd watch them taking the food in, little worms wriggling around and caterpillars trying to escape beaks. Invertebrate horror film if ever there was one. With the days gradually getting warmer, we used to sit outside listening to the chirping, drinking our cups of tea and thinking about how hot it really must be in that nest box for those poor little birds. Each one of us would take watch a bit at a time to try and work out whether we could catch the actual fledging in motion. How many times we could do that, so we could record each time for my little son. Although we were stuck in the house because of the lockdown, just sitting here was a little bit of peace, somewhere where the stresses of the outside world couldn't penetrate. It's just us, the garden, and the little birds in the nest box. Over time, the feeding would get slightly less frequent. The blue tit parents would hang outside a little bit longer, then go in, do the feeding, then come out. We wondered if they were getting anywhere near fledging at that point. So every morning I come outside, get my camera ready on my phone, and sit there waiting, poised to catch the first sight of any little ones popping their heads out. So on this morning, I saw the parent spending an awful lot of time hanging outside. I figured he might be trying to tease one out. I saw a little face just appear. So I grabbed my camera, come back, and obviously it had gone. So then the waiting began. It wasn't very long before our patience was rewarded. Saw his little face just pop over the top. You could tell he was inquisitive. He was looking around outside to see what was going on. And over the course of the morning, he'd look outside, go back in again, look outside a bit more, and go back in again. The parent birds kept coming backwards and forwards. You could see they were trying to taunt him outside. Sometimes they go in and come out with food still in their mouths. Still, the hesitant little fellow inside, or girl, was beginning to think about spreading its wings. You could almost tell it was looking around going, "No, I don't think so," and then go back inside again. I knew that if I walked away it would happen. If I turned my back to go inside the house, it would then suddenly pop out and I'd have lost my chance forever. Since my brother was at work that day, I couldn't let him not see it happening, so I had to stay here, poised. Parents were really beginning to try and get this one out. He'd be hopping backwards and forwards, chirping from outside, trying to attract his attention. The promise of food not in the actual nest box, but outside and on the branches of the nearest bush. It was a tense moment. The cats next door usually prowl the gardens once they found out there was a nest that had chicks inside. So from one side of my eyes I was testing to make sure that there was no cats in the garden. The other side making sure I didn't lose the moment that when it finally popped out. I asked my son what we should call him. I showed him a picture of it, wanted to find his fledged, and he said Jeremy. So this is Jeremy's face, looking out, seeing if he'd like the world. I willed Jeremy to pop out just while I was watching. Come on, Jezza. Come on, son. Isn't that an exciting place? But I was hoping that he'd try his hand at see what the world was like. The parent bird sat in the rose bushes nearby, trying to tease him out. The other hopping backwards and forwards on the trellis. Jeremy kept popping his head out, having a little look around and going back in again. A couple of false starts. Not entirely sure how big he thought his body was. The parent bird was obviously getting flustered with it because he just kept pushing out of the way. But he was quite happy with his little seat there, peering at the outside world, seeing what was going on. I thought it might be me, so I moved back a little bit. My vantage point from the punch bag wasn't quite what it was, but I could still see what was going on. Parent birds would be going in and out, and little Jezza would just be there, poking his head outside, drinking in the day. Gotta admit, it's quite a nice day to do a little bit of sunbathing. Then she went back out there again, and he was getting so close. He'd get a little claw out, look like he's about to go, and then he'd go back inside. But I'm not sure what he saw. Maybe some flies. Looked tasty. But you could see he was getting really, really close. Just eager to be involved in the outside world. Seemed to take forever that morning. Just watching him go in and out like a fiddler's elbow. But neither of us was in any rush. I'd got another cuppa. He was just there, trying the whole size. He was looking so close at this point. I was willing him from my seat. All he had to do was take a step out. I was beginning to get worried about what would happen if he just didn't fly, he just fell down. So in one of his moments of being inside, I snuck over and put a bowl underneath just in case I had to rescue him. The parents by now were there, really trying to taunt him out. I can't speak bird, but I'm pretty sure there might have been some swear words involved. Putting him on, and then he was out. Flew straight into the rose bushes in the protection of the thorns. Watched the parents go down and feed him there for a little while. Parent birds would halve their time between little Jezza in the bushes and the rest of the tweeting ones in the box. Wouldn't think it of a little yellow bird, but they are so hard to see. Perfectly camouflaged in the undergrowth. Stood there watching it for a while, till eventually it hopped in further. After little Jezza was free, the wait was on for the next ones to fledge. I'm not entirely sure how many were left in there now, it's very hard to tell. We're not entirely sure it's the entire 7, but there's still a couple more in there that we could hear. The parent birds carried on their work between both sites. The new fledgling in the bush, and the remaining ones actually in a box. While we waited, life around the shed and the garden carried on as normal. Projects were carried out, things were fixed, things were made. And all while outside in the garden, life was moving on for our little bird family. We carried on watching later into the day. Nothing was going to happen in the evenings. Apparently they fledge in the mornings. The next one kind of stuck his head out a couple of times, had a little nose around, but nothing really happened that evening. We were beginning to wonder if anything would happen. We could still hear the birds inside. We could still see the bird box move and backwards and forwards as they were arguing to try and get out. Still the parent birds would fly up, do the dance between the top of the fence, down into the bush, onto the trellis, and back in. But the next morning, my mum was at the kitchen sink, and thanks to the shaky camera footage you can just see, number 2 was about to fledge outside. Like its sibling, it stuck its head out, then a wing, Went back inside again, after a few telling offs from its parent. And finally a bid for freedom to join Jeremy in the bush. It's a bit hard to see him actually with the video, but Mum took a picture. I added a couple of arrows to point out where the sibling was, as yet unnamed. We didn't see the third sibling go or any of the others, so we can only assume there was a 3. But now, the garden seems a little bit quieter without the chirping. A little bit more empty without our birds. As things turn back to normal, the only signs of the birds being in the bushes being poop on the bin lid. We look forward to next year when they return. We've never had birds in our garden before. They kind of add a little extra something. Watching the parent birds go in, seeing them work tirelessly to raise the young, and waiting for them to fledge, hoping they'll be safe. We'll miss Jeremy and his family. We're hoping that they'll all come back next year and use the actual other nest boxes that we have for them. I'm hoping that next year my son can be here with me to witness it all together.